affiliations that the manager has. A very busy docket tonight. First time we get a chance, we're going to talk about the way we, as Terry says, do business, because I think she's got a good point. Before I turn it over to you, Marcus, there is one thing pending. There's some pending legislation in the General Assembly about party affiliations and local races being on the ballot. I was, I offered my opinion that I was personally opposed to it, but before the council can actually, before the city can take a position, the council needs to actually weigh in so we can instruct the manager who will instruct our governmental relations folk. Brian Pennington is up there to either oppose it or support it. Is there anybody who got anything to say in favor of it?
It's my understanding that the law is only changing that currently localities that run under party affiliation, it does not put the party affiliation on the ballot, and that this law will only impact those localities. Localities that have chosen to run as independents without party affiliation, which is ours, it would not put the party affiliation on there. It's only for, like, I believe Arlington, where they do run, they get party endorsement. But now anybody who runs at that level, they don't ever put the party on there. But I don't know if it necessarily impacts us because we've chosen to not have party endorsements.
That's not the way that I've been told. I didn't read the bill, though, Tommy. You may know more than me. The city attorney actually deferred to the council when it came. I saw that note that you said, say this is a political issue. The council should decide it. Do you?
The guidance that we're looking for the council is whether we want to oppose having party affiliation in our councilmanic elections. And so if, as you say, Mr. Smeagol, that it's not going to happen, we've got nothing to worry about. If it is going to happen, we want to know whether we should oppose it or support it or be neutral.
I agree. It's much better not having a party label.
I think that the party labels just make everything so divisive, and
It could lead to convention, primaries, party primaries for city council.
yeah,
There's just no end to it once it starts. So. Okay, I don't hear anybody. I heard Tommy saying that he's not sure if it doesn't apply to us, that's great. If somehow,
I think
sometimes those things get amended in the General Assembly, so we'll oppose it. Okay,
Just let Brian know that we oppose it.
Right.
I think
That's all
that
he's
we
got to
function in the best interest of the city.
Virginia Municipal League.
Having said that,
Okay,
Okay. Mayor and council, what we'll do now is move to item 4, which is the Community Services Board discussion. It's really two pieces. Now, Bernard will lead off with a follow-up from the discussion that we had when we last met about basically an overview of the proceedings that related to the Jill McClone case. And then after that, I will provide information for you about the CSP and the recommendation from the administration about how the structure will be moving forward. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Bernard.
Okay, thank you. The next hearing in the litigation brought by the Community Services Board in order to try to collect the money that was wrongfully paid to Jill McClone is on February the 13th. And Adam Melita sent to you the pleadings in that case that include our causes of actions and the facts underlying them. And he's going to speak about that case when I finish. And I'm going to run through some of the milestone events that occurred, starting with the relatively new executive director coming to meet with me in May of 2010. She had 3 issues that day, one of which was I've learned that there's an employee who's been suspended for over 12 years and been paid, and what do I do? So my advice to her then was to start with never sending her another paycheck, and she followed that advice and then asked if we could help her determine what personnel actions or what might be appropriate to do given such a debacle. Jack Cloud, who is here, worked with her, and they interviewed employees, and it resulted in her terminating 4 employees at the time. Jack and Maureen also determined to ask the police to investigate it, and they did investigate it. After Maureen Womack had made the decisions about what actions were appropriate for the personnel actions, she held a press conference in an attempt to provide that information and to assure the public that she would be making certain that something like that never happened again, and that some actions had been taken. In addition to, we referred it to the police, Maureen and Jack did, then the FBI and people from the Federal Inspector General's office and State Inspector General's office contacted the Community Service Board. The Community Service Board fully cooperated and provided all of the information that they could do. The employees that were terminated, or at least 3 of them, sought unemployment compensation. When I say 3 did, I mean Jill McClone did also. The commission denied employment compensation benefits to Jill McClone, and she did not appeal that. 2 officers, the Human Resources Officer and the Berardi, and the head of the department that McClone worked in, Crisp, also sought unemployment compensation, and the level of hearing officer that had denied benefits to Jill McClone also denied them to them. They appealed, and the first appellate level again denied unemployment benefits to them, and then on the 3rd level, the hearing officer, the final hearing officer, the final appellate officer, determined that the deliberate indifference to corporate policy wasn't sufficient and allowed the unemployment benefits. Not long after that, Berardi and Crisp brought a lawsuit saying that the executive director, Ms. Womack, had defamed Berardi and Crisp by associating them, as she did, with the Jill McClone scandal. Soon after that, the Commonwealth Attorney finished his review of the police investigation and informed the police chief that at that point in time, he was not proceeding with a criminal prosecution. The FBI and the Inspector General do not, in the ordinary course, divulge their position on investigations. Jack Cloud was able to ask of the U.S. Attorney, and he was unable to say whether the FBI would ever, whether the U.S. Attorney would ever prosecute based upon the FBI's investigation. The U.S. Attorney has not commenced a prosecution to date, and we don't expect one. At this point in time, we conferred with the Community Service Board and discussed whether the Community Service Board should bring a lawsuit in order to try to collect these monies, and the board did determine to do so. And so we prepared those pleadings and we filed them, that the defendants initially filed what's known as a demurrer and said that we hadn't stated a cause of action, that we might have described mismanagement, but that we hadn't stated a basis upon which to recover. Judge Martin initially sustained the demurrers, but gave us leave to amend. And so the complaint that was delivered to you was the amended complaint, and the hearing on that is on February the 13th. Jack Cloud is with me today, and Adam is prepared the lawsuit and is prepared to give you a brief synopsis of that, so that you don't just have to rely upon having read it.
Thank you, Bernard. I do want to rely primarily.
Adam, come back.
Okay.
So the camera's got to catch you too.
Thank you, members of council. I am handling this litigation on behalf of the Community Services Board as part of their effort to, in common parlance, kind of get to the bottom of what went on here. So we have done the same sort of investigation, and Jack Cloud has started that. I've done some more of that investigation, the same type of work that we believe that the police did and that we believe the Commonwealth Attorney did. We had enough information to provide a level of detail that we believe should satisfy the court with regard to everything that we know about this case. And at this point, we do have what we believe are answers to the basic who, what, where, when, why, and how questions. I might characterize the how question as the hardest question of all to answer, because we've only really been given one response from the various folks who were at the CSB management level, who made the decisions to maintain this person on the payroll for 12 years. The answer they've given is that they forgot to deal with it, or when they were reminded to deal with it, other things came up and it didn't get handled at all. I was going to say in a timely fashion, but that sort of goes without saying. So it slipped under the radar. Eventually, other people would ask about it again until finally, under the directorship of Ms. Womack, there was a resolution to the issue. So that's the answer we've been given consistently by the folks who were involved with maintaining this person on the payroll for so long. Finally, I'll just summarize for you the basic gist of the lawsuit. It is an unusual case. I've looked for precedents of this type of case. It just doesn't happen. Initially, when the CSB board was asking about it, they didn't understand why there wasn't a crime here. And again, for the life of us, it's hard to figure out where somebody did something criminally wrong. It does, for all intents and purposes, appear to be sort of the grossest of mismanagement. And so, based on that theory, and that being the answer we've been given consistently, supported by the documentary evidence that the CSB has, we've prepared this suit attempting to recover money based on compensating somebody on the premise that they would be doing work for the CSB when in fact they weren't doing any work. And to the extent that was a misrepresentation to the organization and to the board who budgeted those funds to make sure that this person was helping with the process of providing services to Norfolk's substance addicted and disabled citizens, none of those services were being delivered by Jill McGlone, even though she was being paid for it. The nature of the case against Ms. McGlone, as I've outlined in my memo to you, but I think it deserves mentioning, is not based on any sort of fault or wrongdoing by Ms. McGlone. It's based on an unjust enrichment theory, the theory being she was the recipient, unwitting or not, of money that she was not entitled to get, and the reason she wasn't entitled is because she wasn't actually doing the work that the money was intended to compensate her for. So, like I said, I think we have, we know what happened, and we know the people that were involved with mismanaging the situation. We've been given an answer by the folks who mismanaged it, or by their attorney representatives, and that's the theory that we're going to continue to work with until some other explanation is provided.
Has the previous executive director, I'm sure, been at all questioned, talked to? Because Maureen Womack found the problem, and she was the new director.
It appears that
And so what's going on prior to her getting there? What about?
it was, and Maureen was not the first person to find it. She does appear to be the first person to have definitively dealt with it. Dr. Pratt, who preceded Maureen Womack in the executive director position, was interviewed by the police. I don't believe at the point where our office started to investigate the matter, he had already retired from the executive director position. So, so we did not have the opportunity to interview him as an employee. He was not obviously one of the 4 folks who were terminated. So he did speak with the police, and he did explain, consistent with what I've described from the other employees, which is we weren't aware that this hadn't been dealt with. I thought it was. Every time somebody brought it to my attention, I instructed somebody to take care of it, and I wasn't aware that it didn't get fixed.
You know, I spent part of the weekend, you know, reviewing everything that was in our file, and reminding myself of what had gone down and what we knew about. the dates and the sequencing of events and what you label as the grosses of mismanagement, I mean, there's some truth to that, but this is beyond outrageous. Having looked at it all over again after 12 years of somehow someone in a supervisory position just letting it slide week after week and almost, I mean, at least twice a month they had to ask themselves, should we send this check out? What is this person doing? I mean, it's beyond the pale of anything I've ever seen. And the answer so far about that it's just being somehow, we didn't get to it, it was sort of, uncomfortable. It just doesn't wash. I mean, I know the police have not been able to find anything that they would prosecute someone for. The Commonwealth Attorney hasn't. I don't know what the grand jury would do, but this is outrageous stuff beyond that. And, to the extent that the community wants an answer, I'm sure they do, but until somebody actually comes forward, we are where we are.
Well, Bernard, if we could back up, because it really comes down to what your office knew and when they knew it. And I want you to go back and tell me your office, when the McGlone issue, and I will say this is an excellently written pleading. This is excellently written. And in fact, it encompasses all of an investigation that I would want, except the conclusion of reckless wanton disregard, simple negligence, or criminal intent. It really is a true investigation as laid out in the complaint, as it's written. You just can't wrap that conclusion in. It's what we need. But Bernard, going back, your office was involved in the initial McGlone, the city attorney's office. I don't know if you were city attorney at the time, were you?
I'm not sure. It was 97, 98.
When her initial employment problems resulted, you had a city attorney in those meetings with the CSB, or there was a city attorney. I take it, was there?
Yes, that we assign a city attorney
Okay.
and attends virtually all of the board meetings, but that I don't know that it was ever a matter that went to the board level, and so that it would not usually, at that point in time, at this time, because it's so extraordinary, the board has had to discuss it. But yes, that we had a city attorney that was attending board meetings regularly.
All right. Now, so we know that your office was familiar with this from about 97 on, 98, when it first resulted as it's laid out within the complaint, the amended complaint.
Right.
Now, as we move along, at some point, there are discussions, it appears, amongst Berardi, Crisp, Pratt, and Wise, that they're talking about this. Has your office pulled every memorandum and email that resulted in that time period of those individuals that were at the CSB? I assume you have, for discovery purposes, it still exists.
We have reviewed everything we could get our hands on.
Right.
As the mayor says, that it's most extraordinary, that we agree that it's something beyond the grosses of mismanagement, and the causes of action that we pled include that. And so that we cannot say, we're surprised that we don't find a rational explanation. And so that we have everything we have reviewed supports the defendant's defense that they just really messed it up.
Well, reading your, and I disagree. I'm reading your amended complaint. It's more than just really messing it up.
Right.
I find criminal intent. If I was sitting in a robe, I find criminal intent. And I find wire fraud, and I find a willful disregard. And I have sat in a black robe. So, but I'll get to that in a minute. What I'm looking for is, your office was familiar with this, the McGlone issue, in the late 90s. At some point, your office became unfamiliar with it. When and why?
Lawyers generally don't make personnel decisions.
I know, but I'm sure that they're consulted. Not, you may not necessarily know about it, but you had somebody
The-
there.
The record shows that the city attorney, Dan Hagermaster, was familiar with it.
Where's he now?
He's retired.
Okay.
That close to this time, he recommended to the management that they do something about it. And so that he became familiar with it in part because one of Jill McClellan's offenses was to divulge health information pertaining to a client. And so that the community board was sued because of that. So he had that defense.
Right.
And he successfully defended, filed summary dispositions, and the plaintiff's lawyer saw the handwriting on the wall and none suited it. So he succeeded, and he said,
Very good legal work.
very good legal work. And in addition to the legal work, let me tell you, you need to take care of that. That's a personnel matter that's yours that you need to handle, and that is beyond the lawyer's role to tell a management about who they should hire and fire. But he went beyond the role and said, do that, and then left it there for the management to attend to.
Has he been debriefed?
Has
your office
yes,
contacted him
yes,
since
yes,
this has come about?
yes.
Did he keep notes, and were those notes reviewed?
That he kept files, as all people
Right.
do. Those have been reviewed, and all that he remembers is just what I told you about that.
Who picked up when he left?
John Richardson,
All right, and John's still in there, just retired.
just retired.
All right, and did you debrief with John to
I
find out
did,
if
and he
this came
never
up?
he never was aware, never heard the name Jill McClone, was never asked about it, and only heard about it until after Ms. Womack discovered the situation.
Let me ask you, with regard to your discussions, or at least you've told me Inspector General, Police, FBI, Commonwealth Attorney's Office, and I read the letter the Commonwealth Attorney Office wrote. AUSA was consulted, at least what's going to happen was the request. And I will agree that they will never tell you when or if they're going to go through with an investigation or a criminal indictment or warrant. But I do have, what discussions did your office have to seek a criminal indictment against anyone, especially Ms. McGlone in this case, on, and I assume wire fraud because she was paid, it's a direct deposit? Was it a direct deposit?
I don't know that.
Well, her check was, she didn't come pick it up every time.
I don't know if it was.
All right,
made
so if
or
it's direct deposit, you've got a wire fraud. At least, I think it's there because you've already pled constructive and actual fraud.
Right.
So what discussions did your office have with each of the prosecuting agencies to promote, because you have to promote your case, to promote a criminal indictment?
That we did not lobby for an indictment, that the Commonwealth Attorney has that within his province, that we prosecute ordinances just by his permission. I had one conversation with him that he called to give me a heads up that he was concluding that he didn't have a basis to proceed.
But he never told you what he did. I read the letter, it doesn't say much of anything.
Other
you.
than- Well, I assume he read don't you think he was completely relying upon the police report?
I assume,
Well,
we don't know, he didn't tell us.
Right, he did not. And that I did not lobby him. I just expressed regret that we had been hoping and relying that there would be a prosecution and that would help us get some answers. And it wasn't until after that that we had to begin to evaluate the ability to bring a civil action.
Well, I can tell you that AUSAs often lobby back because they're looking for work. And in particular, let's say a supervisor. And I've been there when they've discussed it. And I really believe that if you're just going to turn a file over, if somebody brings me a file and turns over to me and says, here, read it, that's a big difference than somebody sitting down with me and explaining to me what they're looking for. What do you want out of this is an issue that I suspect may have assisted. If we had walked in and said, we're looking for a wire fraud case here, a conspiracy wire fraud case against Ms. McGlone, that didn't happen. And they're going to we're assuming that they performed their investigation of reading a police report. Most of these people, I'm sure, took the fifth anyhow. And I find it hard to believe that if we have a civil complaint that alleges it, that at least in her case, it didn't rise to criminal. Let me ask, so we have no meetings with any of the no meetings with any prosecutorial agency to request, tell them what we're looking for.
No, we did not endeavor to practice criminal law. We
I'm
spoke,
not, all right, you don't have to practice criminal law, Bert. You know that.
I don't even know
We
what
could have
wire
sent Marcus to
fraud,
go in there and tell him.
I don't even know what wire fraud is.
Okay, well,
That the only criminal law I've ever practiced is prosecuting the city misdemeanors, which I do through the permission of the Commonwealth Attorney. I don't have any opinion about whether the Commonwealth Attorney knows what he's doing in his job. So that it is his obligation and responsibility to determine if a crime is, if he's got basis to proceed, and I don't have any opinion. I'm not second guessing him. He knows much more about criminal law than I do.
well, let me ask you this. I'm going to go, and Adam, you have your, you look at your computer. Paragraph 75 and 76. At no time after April 14th, 1998, did Crisp or anyone else ever change, rescind, resolve, or in any way alter McGlone's suspension without pay. At the time, I take it Crisp thought that she was suspended without pay when in reality she was receiving pay.
I don't know that.
Well, I know you've pled it on paragraph 75.
Well, we've pled that he never
Changed her
made a
status
change.
to say it was without pay.
Correct.
All right, then
It
paragraph.
may be that one of the things that has happened in this case is that, and this is alleged in the complaint, is that the investigative file for that the CSB should have had for the health information disclosures is missing. There's an empty folder, but there does not seem to be any investigatory file for the disciplinary action. Whether there is a document in there that terminates the suspension without pay and puts her back onto pay, I don't know.
He never adjusted the status for whatever
I know
reason.
the status was not adjusted, and I know that from the financial information, but it may be that the defendants may appear at trial with a piece of paper or a letter that says she was put onto.
Well, I hope they're going to produce a discovery before it shows up at trial, right? That's what you mean, right?
Right.
Okay. With regard to her, Crisp signs off on all these dates in paragraph 76 that she had used 40 hours of leave time, even though she never worked. He knew she wasn't working, right?
Correct.
Whether she was paid or unpaid, he still endorsed 40 hours of leave time for her.
Correct.
Now, tell me why that is not criminal.
Well, I'm not capable of telling you why it's not criminal because I'm not capable of telling you why it is criminal.
Are we just saying he was just so grossly wanton disregard?
I will tell you that when interviewed, he said that he was instructed by his superiors to go ahead and mark the pay records in exactly that manner.
So his defense would be, I'm just following orders. You know
That's
that,
the answer we've
that
been
doesn't
given.
work in war. We know that. Ask any lieutenant that. So as far as we know right now, he would sign, so he would say that she received 40 hours of leave time. Forget her pay. He knew she didn't work, but she earned it and she was paid for 40 hours of leave time.
Correct.
And that, not only did he, throughout your complaint, he wasn't the only one. You would agree with me that others signed off on it, his superiors. Signed off on her leave time and she never worked.
Nobody else signed the forms.
Right.
The forms were
But we're familiar
submitted
with it.
to Ms. Berardi through the Human Resources Department and were processed so that the paychecks could go out. If the hourly information isn't input into the system, it won't generate compensation.
All right, page 29, paragraph 78. On November 30th, 2008, Crisp signed a labor report form which indicated that McGlone had not done any work, had used 20 hours of leave time, and claimed that she was on administrative leave with pay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's an explanation for this because we haven't gotten into discovery. We haven't even got past demurrer yet.
But we know for a fact
But
he signed a form saying that.
Some of his forms say administrative leave. Some of the forms don't have any indication of what form of leave. So we've pled exactly what documentation reputation
Well, I
we
think the
have.
documents speak volumes for themselves. Don't you agree? You must. You put it in your complaint, right?
I think they do.
Well, what I'm getting at is, and I've circled, how many times can somebody use 24 hours of leave and not done any work, and yet they're still signing off on her form? And you cannot tell me that there is an intent. That is not gross, wanton, willful disregard. When you do that for years, an intent and even a malice can be found in that. So I'm curious as to now why this synopsis of a complaint is not taken to and sat down with the prosecutorial office.
Well, we'd be happy to send this to the Commonwealth Attorney.
Well, I think we need to sit down with you. If you want, I will go with you.
I'd be happy to
I
schedule
don't-
them.
Paul,
I don't think that's
he
your
said
role.
that he doesn't do felonies.
No, I don't
Well-
care, but you don't need, you're not for this council
Fine.
or for the city. I mean,
All right, well,
Andy, I think you're doing
I
just
understand.
fine,
Well,
but
Mr. Prodigero,
Paragraph
I
88.
will sit down with him so that,
well, I will
You
talk
know-
to you and you will then communicate to him what we need.
that would be helpful.
All right, and maybe we'll even go sit down. I'll communicate to you what we need to sit down with the United States Attorney's Office. Paragraph 88, is that a typo, 24,000 hours of leave, or is that supposed to be 24?
No, that's 24,000. If you add up the amount of time that she worked over, that she was paid for working over 12 years, approximately 250 days a year, 8 hours a day.
All right, paragraph 95. And I mean, there are more, but I'm picking and choosing what I could, or what at least takes me to my point. Paragraph 95, each of Chris' submissions for annual budget funding, for the CSB's clinical service program made between July 1, 1999 and July 1, 2009 was a misrepresentation, since at the time he submitted each, Crisp knew or should have known that McGlone would not be doing any work for the CSB, even though he was requesting funding for her to be paid as an FTE, which I understand is her position, right?
It's either a full-time employee or a full-time equivalency. One of the pieces of information that the CSB tracks and provides to the state on an annual basis as part of their disclosure of their funding, as part of their agreement with the state, includes measurements of what services are going to be provided, broken down by a ratio of how many full-time equivalent positions are working to provide those services. So the more people you have, as far as staff providing services to the same number of clients, the lower your ratio goes as far as the effectiveness of your delivery. So carrying on your budget and on your disclosure to the state a full-time employee who you're paying who actually isn't providing any benefit for your clients does drive your ratio down and makes you seem less efficient. So it is of significance that they continued to show the state that they had somebody working when in fact that person was not going to be able to help them provide any services.
Yet the entire time they would have known, right?
Correct. The folks who were preparing those budget documents, we believe, should have known that at least one person in the substance abuse division wouldn't be helping with those services.
And in fact, you even allege the same with regard to Wise in paragraph 113, 114,
Correct.
that they're requesting funds to fill a slot that they know the person is not working. And again on 131, paragraph 130 on page 31, Wise again knew or should have known, right?
Correct.
She's approving a budget request knowing the person's not working.
Correct. And we do have minutes from those meetings, and we know what budgets
What
were
meetings do you have
presented.
minutes? What
Board
meetings?
meetings, where budgets were presented to the board and upon which the board voted to approve budgets.
Did anyone try to examine 18.2, 498.3 misrepresentations? Any person who does commercial dealings within this jurisdiction, the Commonwealth? Has anybody looked at that for falsification, misleads, or cover-ups? by trick, scheme, or device?
A
Anybody?
criminal statute?
Criminal
I
statute?
can't tell you if anybody else.
Did
looked
your
at it.
office-
I did not.
It's a class 6 felony. Anybody look at this? Try to see if it fits. Can we?
We can, it's
Would
the
you please have somebody in your
Commonwealth
office
attorney.
get
Who will-
Jack to? Now, why don't we get a memo to ourselves first and put it on a silver platter for the Commonwealth attorney or the U.S. attorney to be able to prosecute this case?
Is that
Or at
a
least,
state
at least,
statute?
it's a state statute. Now,
Commonwealth attorney.
it may deal with contractors outside, but there does appear to be a case that has somebody within the government that has committed a misrepresentation by trick, scheme, device of a material fact, making any false, fictitious, or fraudulent statements or representations. And that appears what we have here. Got one more. What other suits are pending?
The
That-
defamation suit against.
All right, tell me about that.
That Berardi and Chris sued Mrs. Womack over the press comments she made at the press to explain the status of the case,
Okay,
and that the Community Service Board's insurance covers that.
we're not involved in this.
We are not involved in that.
Now, and then lastly, tell me how the grievance procedure that is currently set up that we have, because I assume that she could grieve this. Is that what you told me before? Right.
Well, technically, she might have been able to, but that just by the passage of time now, she's unable to. And so that when I advised Mrs. Womack to never pay her again, under the grievance parlance, that would have been a grievable action.
All right, let's stop right there.
Right.
So if they had done that in 1997, 98, when this first happened, when all of her conduct, which anybody would have fired her on immediately, she could have grieved at that point.
If they had fired her, yes.
Is there anything in our procedures of grievance that makes it such a burden to be able to dismiss somebody with such gross conduct as hers? And do we have to change our grievance procedures or have them re-examined? That we have people who don't want to grieve, who don't want to fire somebody because it's such a difficult and onerous task. And I'm not saying, and I know I'm going to get Jane Bethel on my back, and I apologize. But the bottom line is that is our procedure so onerous that we have people in management who don't want to fire people because they're going to end up in a grievance process?
You get me on my soapbox on grievance and grievance rights. That I don't know if you know it, but that the average length of time to terminate a New York City public school teacher is 3 years. That's not our experience, but that it is required by the state, our system of classification and the provision of grievance, but that this council has had conversations with us about making improvements to it. When Chief High left, I think in his debriefing that he said that the two things that he thought would be most helpful to management, particularly police management, would be the ability to have at-will senior police officers and the ability to end the risk that if a person was found to have done the misdeeds that caused their discipline and termination, that a panel wouldn't have the ability to substitute their judgment for the judgment of the management and what the appropriate discipline is. And so that is something that we've talked about in the past, and we may be bringing back to this council, so that we don't have the ability to radically change it, but there may be some changes that could improve it.
And I'm going to conclude with this. You would agree with me that there was no discussion with the Commonwealth Attorney of you or a member of your office going to the grand jury and testifying yourselves before the grand jury. Am I correct?
No,
To seek an indictment.
We did not discuss grand juries.
And he didn't tell you that existed.
Right.
And you would also agree with me that there was no discussion of him calling a special investigative grand jury in this case, if it fit within the statute. He did not do that, and that was not discussed.
Right. In the one conversation I had with him at his conclusion, we did
Right.
not discuss that. I don't know what he might have said to his colleagues or anybody else, but with me in the one discussion, no, we did not.
And that in that case, if he believed there was no probable cause, at least he would have given it to the citizens to make the decision if probable cause existed at a grand jury, and they could have indicted or not indicted,
Sure.
right? And he didn't do that.
Right. There was no
He
grand jury.
hasn't done that.
Have you examined if there's any statute of limitations on the federal side of any of these criminal charges?
No, we've not.
Because the feds have
undertaken-
statute of limitations,
We've not undertaken any analysis of federal criminal.
and we know there is no statute of limitations on felonies in state court.
I believe that's correct.
You rest your case, or would you, would you like to sum up?
This is better when I get in trouble. This is better than court TV. That wasn't live.
Can we get you on the jury?
No, but I'll put a robe on again.
We'd like to see that.
You did well. Thank you for
Thank you.
your time, and I know that we had talked
We've
ahead
had
of
some
time.
follow-up.
I did have some prep for him. I did not catch him off guard per se. Some of the questions you were not prepared for, and you answered them to my satisfaction. I appreciate it. I think that, as I said last time, I think we probably let it get, it just, I was too new. And I fought myself. I had just come on council that month. And, and perhaps it just, and then it just grew, and I don't think we ever got it. But the investigation is there. I appreciate it. That is you have a staff that I do believe in. I think some of the issues I've raised today, I do stand on, and that's communication with the prosecuting authority that we should have done. And I told you that. And even perhaps trying to get the indictments ourselves, going down there next Wednesday and testifying before a grand jury to seek one, if we didn't have support of the common attorney on it. But I do appreciate your honesty, your forthrightness in your answers, and your staff's.
Let me say, Andy,
Yeah.
you obviously have a great deal of knowledge of criminal work, the rest of us, at least the council members around the table. I think most of us, early on, at least I did, believed that a Commonwealth attorney, city attorney investigation would lead to a resolution that we all, that we could take some solace in, that we would, who knew that it would spin this way. So, but we have some legal actions going on right now. If that doesn't help, we can come back and revisit the request, and so, okay.
We can talk some more. We'll just talk some more.
Wanted
We
to-
have good communication.
Wanted to ask again, and maybe Andy, do you believe that we should get a second opinion from another Commonwealth's attorney from outside of Norfolk to look at this, where it's not in the city?
I think that, Bernard, I think the key is right now, I think part of the problem is we're in civil litigation. And civil litigation, when you have a double role of criminal litigation and civil litigation running hand in hand, it becomes an extremely complex matter. I do think it's something that we can talk about amongst ourselves. I'd like to talk to Bernard about it, and even see where the discussions do go with the prosecutor's office on some of this, especially. And the reason I say this is, especially reading the amended complaint. We can disagree and agree to disagree with judges who have issues on demur. This pleading is very well written. It's one of the better ones I have, and Paul, I think you would agree,
It just
one of
laid
the
it
better
out.
ones I have ever read.
Yeah.
But it does, in my mind, lay out criminal conduct. And it takes it and it summarizes it. And it may not be criminal conduct on all the individuals. I'm not saying that. I do think it lays it out on one individual for sure in particular. And I think that's where we need to, the focus of any prosecution if in the future it occurs. But I think that's something we need to do and discuss in private and see where we go. I don't think that really is something when it comes to criminal prosecutions that we discuss in an open air. You can't, because I think part of it involves, of course, other issues. But I think that the pleading is well done.
Thank you. Would you raise your right hand, please? Marcus, you were going to now talk about where we go.
Yes, okay. With that segue, it is, this next presentation is about the next steps as related to the Community Services Board. What I'd like to do is really focus on, two issues as we go through this presentation. One is that one of our main concerns is just this concept of being a well-managed government. And that's just not the administration, but it's for anybody who's receiving public funds that come from the city. And as we go through the presentation, you'll see why I start off with that premise that is very important, because many times the line blurs about what's a city department versus what is not a city department. The other aspect that's very important is that when it's all said and done, what we are recommending to you tonight is to make sure that we have a system where the services are based on the best service delivery model. We can't lose sight of the clients. In other words, those individuals with mental health issues, intellectual disabilities, and substance abuse issues. So with all that said, everything is geared towards one well-managed organization and not losing sight of the clients. In terms of the overview, great, okay. Basically, what we're going to do is provide you with recommendations from what we had as a work group, and I'll explain the individuals on the work group. But the work group had a mandate, it had some recommendations, but also the work group stopped at a certain point, and that's where the administration picked up. And the administration has recommendations related to the structure and issues that we may have to address moving forward based on recommendations for a structure. The work group composition, I'm very proud of the group that we pulled together. Basically, we had 8 individuals, and then Maureen was a part of the work group as well as myself. But the reason I talk about these 8 individuals, it just wasn't city staff. We went basically across the state. Basically, we had the VP of Medical Affairs from Centera. The next 3 individuals are what I would call CSB directors from various types of CSBs from across the state. Both the director of the Hampton Newport News CSB, in other words, that's an operational CSB. We'll talk about that a bit later, but it goes across jurisdictions. The director, we call it the Richmond Behavioral Health Authority, but that's the equivalent of the CSB for Richmond, as well as the director from the Henrico area, what I call CSB. Again, we had clients or people who receive services. We had the sheriff's office, we had the planning council, and also we had staff from the city auditor's office. Actually, the city auditor sat in on a number of the meetings, as well as a past chair of the CSB. So again, the work group was I think it's a blue ribbon group that came together and gave us great information. I requested the work group do 4 things. 1, basically look at the best organizational structure for the CSB. Also, what would be a good structure for the delivery of services. What's very important is we're looking forward, how can the CSB adapt to changing roles? In other words, the state and federal government, the rules of engagement are changing, and how can we position ourselves, and most importantly, recommendations for how we position ourselves for the future. We had a series of presentations from the CSB director at that time, best practices from across the state from the other CSB directors, as well as we had Paul Gilding, who came down from the state, who basically talked with us about history of CSBs and some things that we should take into account moving forward. It was excellent feedback. We've met monthly in that August to October time frame. We haven't disbanded the group, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that later. What I will say is that the work group had a decision-making model, and right out front, they basically said that, look, Marcus, we don't believe it's the best use of our time to tell you or recommend to you what is the best structure for CSB. That's really what works best for a local government. They said that's really going to be your council's decision with your input. But they said, basically we can help you with some other areas so that we can take into account best practices and make sure that you're looking at what's best for your locality. So it was very good. In other words, you had members from 3 different CSBs, 3 different structures, and I don't know whether or not they didn't want to take shots at each other at the table, but the bottom line is that they basically said that issue number 1 is something that is best for the local government to decide. Some of the recommendations that they had was basically establish a general agreement. As I talk with you tonight, you're going to see that the lines are kind of blurred in some areas when it comes to finance and IT and human resources in terms of what's the responsibility of the city, what's the responsibility of the CSB, and that's something that the work group caught on very quickly. And they said, one of the most important things that you're going to have to do is make sure that you come to some agreement between the council and the board about these mutual roles and responsibilities. I think one of the most important recommendations that came from the work group was to basically enhance the performance contract process. Adam mentioned it a couple times tonight, but to make a long story short, each year the council approves the performance agreement. I can recall when you approved it this last fall, there was discussion about, well, really what does this agreement do? As we talked to the different CSB directors, they said, well, Appendix A is really the roadmap. You can really, in that performance agreement, outline what's important for the city, what's important for the council, what are the outcomes that you want. And it becomes, again, this roadmap or agreement between the city and the CSB, and not necessarily something that is perfunctory. So again, that was very important in terms of recommendation. They said that also, before this an approval of the performance contract, the agreement, there should be a discussion about it. In other words, we could have a session, or the council could have a session with the board to really outline what's in that agreement as opposed to just a vote. So again, those were very good recommendations. One of the other recommendations that the work group said we should focus on, the council should focus on, is to examine the city code and the board composition. Basically, if you go back to when the state had all of the cities declare what type of board they would have, it's back July 1998. Basically, all of the jurisdictions, the 130 plus jurisdictions across the state, had to make a decision whether they would be an operating CSB or an administrative policy CSB, which I'll talk about in detail a little bit later. And it seems that as that process occurred here in Norfolk, that it was more or less status quo. It really wasn't a discussion about, well, what do we want from the CSB? What do we want from the city in terms of mutual responsibilities and things of that nature? They also said take a look, make sure your code is up to date. We looked at some of the areas of the code that we think that we could improve upon. Some of the things that occurred in different cities were that there's a member from the city manager's office that's actually on the CSB board. There were some cities where you have a member from council that's actually on the CSB board. So those were some of the recommendations that came from the work group. One of the big ones was, in the last bullet on this slide, is for the board and the council to have a good discussion about what are the needs of the board in terms of personnel. What kind of skill sets should come to the board. Basically, I will say that the board's been great in terms of collaboration, communication with the administration. And, the board, the code sets up that you have somewhere between 6 and 18 members. Our city code, I'm starting with the Code of Virginia, you can have anywhere from 6 to 18. Our city code limits it to 15. I think there are 2 vacancies right now. But for the most part, there are some opportunities, once again, to have discussion with the board about the skill sets that are needed, as well as potential appointment possibilities. I would spend just a second on this next slide about recommendations for the future. I mentioned Paul Gilding from the state. Again, he came and had a very good conversation with us, and he left us with 3 key points. And that is, there needs to be a discussion about this integration of behavioral health and primary care. That's going to be critical to any CSB. He also said that there's this opportunity for us in the city to better coordinate between agencies. And ultimately, what we're discussing is service delivery. Maybe it's not just focusing on the CSB. What are some similar services that are happening across the board? And then lastly, he left us with a note of saying that we're going to have to deal with managed care, behavioral health care changes that are coming down that will impact us. And we can talk about that a little bit later. The administration, so that's where the work group ended. They basically said, we won't give you a recommendation about your board structure, but we will give you some best practices and we'll keep the lines of communication open. I do agree there's not a universally accepted structure that I could come in tonight and say, this is the best thing that we could do. But what I will do is talk to you about some of the different localities and why those structures work for those localities and why I'm going to present the recommendation to you tonight. I want to start off by talking about board structures. There are 2 real key board structures. We have an operating board here in Norfolk. Okay, and basically the board directly provides the service and the staff report to the board, or better yet, the staff the board hires its own staff. So the delivery of services through its own staff. The Administrative Policy Board, in this arrangement, the board sets the policy, but the staff work for the local jurisdiction. There are two other outliers. Portsmouth basically has a policy advisory board, which there are no operational powers or duties. And then there's also the Behavioral Health Authority. There are three. That needs to be provided by the state. There are three jurisdictions that have that capacity. They're Chesterfield, Richmond, and Virginia Beach, but only Richmond chooses to be a behavioral health authority. It's very close to an operating CSB, and I'll talk about these in more detail in the next slide. Some of the differences is that they can make loans. So again, the Behavioral Health Authority is different than the vast majority of CSB structures across the state. What I'll do is throw out three numbers now when we look at the CSB structures: 40, 28, and 10. Okay, so we have 40 CSBs across the Commonwealth. We have 130 plus localities, so that clearly suggests that there are a number of multiple jurisdiction CSBs. Okay, so in the far left, you'll see operating boards. We basically have, of those 40, 28 CSBs are operating boards. Again, the whole concept of the board setting policy and the staff working for the board. I'm going to pick out two anomalies, and I'm going to reduce it to one in a second. When you start to look at these 28 operating boards, all are multi-jurisdiction with exception of two: Dickinson County and Norfolk City. Okay, so if you want to say the anomaly, 26 of the 28 are multi-jurisdictional, and it makes sense because you don't have one council that is responsible for the efforts of the CSB. It's like the Newport News Hampton. Okay, Dickinson County, for those of you who are familiar with Dickinson County, is about 15,000 people. I don't think that that's the right comparison to Norfolk with almost 243,000 people. As we talked with Dickinson County, basically they were a part of a multi-jurisdictional CSB at one point, and as they went to a single jurisdiction, they basically said, okay, we're not going to change this operating board structure. So I can come directly to Norfolk that we are an outlier. Again, we have a single jurisdiction, but we're operating the CSB as if there are these multi-jurisdiction CSBs, which is the vast majority of operating boards. Administrative policy boards, the 10, if you start to look here, you will see that basically, for the most part, it's one jurisdiction. And because it's one jurisdiction, the board sets the policy, but all of the staff work for the administration. We have three outliers here: Fairfax, Falls Church, Henrico area, and Prince William County. Okay, so 7 of the 10 single jurisdiction. The other 3, while they're multiple jurisdiction, it's like one big locality and 2 smaller ones. So in other words, Fairfax Falls Church, Fairfax County, 1.1 million. City of Fairfax, 23,000, and Falls Church, 12,000. So basically, all of the activity is happening in the big locality, Fairfax County. So again, we could say it's a little different, it's multi-jurisdictional, but for the most part, it is one big locality that's providing the service. And I can go through the other two, but for the most part, it's the same thing. Henrico County, 307,000, New Kid County, the two in Charles City are the 2 smaller ones, and in between them, they barely have 25,000 folks. So as you start to look at this administrative policy, CSB structure, it's for the most part one locality, and in that administrative policy structure, that one locality has a board that sets policy, but all of the staff report to the city manager or to the CAO of the city or county. Options for us. The options I put out for you tonight are basically 3. We could keep the operating board structure intact and utilize many of the recommendations from the work group. In other words, look at the operating agreement, look at MOUs, things of that nature. I don't recommend that. We could do option 2, which is initiate dialogue with other localities to expand to a multi-jurisdictional CSB. I think ultimately that may be a very good option for the city. As a matter of fact, when we discussed shared services with Virginia Beach and Chesapeake, I put this on the table. I'm not sure that this will be one that's we ultimately do, but it is something that's going to take multiple steps, and it would take multiple jurisdictions to agree. And that's why my recommendation to you tonight is option 3, which is to change the CSB designation to an administrative policy CSB and convert the staff to city employees. And then we would be much like the 10 that I identified previously. I would say that a couple things that we need to take into account when we start to look at that recommendation. One, there are really 3 options, well, I guess 3 at a minimum, that you could literally bring the CSB in as a standalone department. I will tell you, of the 10 CSBs that are administrative policy, it's 50-50. About 5 of them have the CSB as a standalone department, and the other 5 have the CSB as some type of division within human services. Okay, so again, the option 1, it could be a standalone department. Option 2, it could be set up within the Department of Human Services. But again, I like option 3, which would be, again, what we received from the state in terms of recommendations, to focus on a comprehensive service delivery model. Don't focus on just whether the CSB is within human services or a standalone department, but to what extent we can go across departments and make sure there's opportunities that we're not redundant in the delivery of service, with ultimately those 2 points that I stated at the beginning, being a well-managed government, and 2, to focus on the clients, the people who receive the services. Issues to consider moving forward. Basically, I mentioned earlier the customers and clients, to make sure that the delivery of service.
Marcus,
Yes,
do you want any feedback? before you-
sure.
I mean, does anybody, I mean, it seems to me like you've set out a very logical, movement forward of how we bring the CSB in, and you're the professional here. I'm prepared to accept your recommendations. I don't know if anybody has any other questions. It seems like it's certainly a movement in the right direction. Any other?
Marcus,
Go ahead.
You and I are on the shared services with other cities, which is one of the options you had. Is any of the potential of the different ways we do it make that undoable harder rather than easier? Should we go that way as we try to affect savings by sharing with other cities?
Again, ultimately, I think that's the right way to go. It's just timing. What makes it difficult is that you have 2 of those jurisdictions that are already administrative policy CSB. So they have the single jurisdiction. The CSB sets the policy, but those staff work for the city. At some point, there would need to be a discussion about how we go from really a administrative policy CSB back to them being an operating CSB. So that would be somewhat of a leap, for lack of a better word, for
Well,
them.
I guess what I'm saying is that these are the 3 options. Make that less, if we decided to do that down the road, make that easier or harder?
I think in the shared services model, if I understand your question correctly, it's best in terms of the overall.
Right, but, okay, but the 3 options within how the city take it over, is what you're saying. Is any of those unwindable, harder to unwind if we were to work with another?
Not in my estimation.
Let me ask you, if they come in-house, does that affect our liability fund that we normally keep? Do we have to increase it considering the suits that result in patient delivery?
It would be a decision that we could make. We might conclude that was the most efficient way. Currently, they maintain insurance. And so it may be that we do this for scope. We have a discrete policy that covers slips and falls there because of the
CGL
crowds.
policy.
Yeah, so that would be analysis that we would have to do if they came in-house, whether it would just be covered by our self-insurance,
Right.
or whether we would seek discrete insurance, whether it was available just to cover their activities. But that, given the nature of their work compared to a police department, it doesn't present as much liability.
Well, I guess then the physicians who deliver services, psychiatrists, let's say, prescribes the wrong medication, that comes under his personal insurance carrier for his malpractice?
If he is an independent contractor, which I think
Most
is
of them.
virtually all, yes. I don't know if we have any employee who is prescribing. I would be surprised if that were the case.
And that is, and I'll just do it very quickly, those are some of the issues, again, the risk liability.
Right.
Real estate, legal and financial issues, agreements, contracts. One of the things I would like to just bring to your attention is just administrative and personnel issues. So at some point, if I haven't said it, let me say it now. What's very important is bringing the CSB in. It's very important that there is that we take into account the employees, the CSB employees. Okay. One thing that stands out for me is that they are currently in a defined contribution plan. We're in a defined benefit plan. We've been working with the legal department to make sure that as we analyze this, that we are, again, keeping taking into account those employees. Because we can debate a defined contribution plan versus defined benefit plan all day long, but the issue is ultimately could be somebody who's doing a job today that's doing the same job tomorrow, that if we don't go about this in a thorough way, they could have a negative impact to them because of going from one plan to another. I think that if there are no questions, I'd like to just do the next steps, which is on slide 18, is that I'd like to continue to utilize the expertise from the work group that we pulled together. I think it's very important that, immediately that we begin to engage with city staff, CSB staff, to begin the evaluation process. I outlined, a half a dozen issues that may be out there. There could be another half a dozen issues. I'd like to fully vet those issues within the next 30 days and be able to come back to council, not necessarily with a recommendation, but if we can vet them out, maybe even a proposed ordinance. We can give you an update at the February 7th. We're having a work session there with the aim to have a final presentation, or excuse me, a final resolution to you by the end of the month. So what I'd like to do is that with your agreement today, start to move fast forward, because it seems that this is the right thing for us to do. It's just getting all the players around the table to make sure that we understand any unintended consequences. And I'm not suggesting that we'd have to wait until July 1. This may be a situation that we can iron these issues out, that there could be the immediate bringing in the CSB to the city.
Sounds like a really ambitious timetable to me, Marcus. I'm glad you put it out there like that. If you can have something to us by February 7th and then try to, you're almost about a month away, then resolve it. Okay. Okay.
That's a great presentation. I appreciate it. I know it took a little longer, maybe if someone wanted to wait, but it lays it all out in a pretty understandable manner. So thank you, and the staff, and the work group.
Thank you.
Okay. You want to take a deep breath before you go
That
on
would be great.
to the mid-year?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm doing okay, how are you?
Good. Yes, yes, yes. Nice to see you.
Update in terms of the city's finances. I will tell you that this year's a little different. Typically, we give you a lot of economic data I'd like to just save that for the Finance and Economic Development Committee. One, because there's going to be a bunch of folks smarter than me doing their forecast tomorrow, and we'd like to steal a little information from them. I will tell you that we are putting in place a group of individuals to help us more so on the economic forecasting side. We actually are going to have the chief economist for the governor come down this month and talk with us, as well as pull in some business leaders from the area and other economists from ODU and also Norfolk State. So that's going to be key. So typically you see a lot of economic data. I won't do it at this meeting. We'll do it at the committee meeting going forward. Really, there are 4 key areas here. We'll tell you where we really ended up in 2011. We'll talk about where we are in 2012. We'll talk a little bit about 2013. And we'll talk a little bit about the 5-year forecast. Basically, 2011, so again, the period ended June 30th, and we start off with the budget. You will recall that the approved budget was about 5% less than the previous year. It was the second consecutive decline in the approved budget, and the steepest since the early 90s. One of the key issues at that point was that real estate assessments fell a little bit more than 3%. It was the first decline since the mid-90s. But if you start to just focus on this chart, what you really see is, and we'll do this often, I'll make some comparisons between 2007 and 2013, but I'll also make some comparisons between 2007 and 2011. If you start to look at the general fund budget, again, the budget in 2007 was about $266 million. And then you have 3 years of growth. By the time,
767.
yeah, $766 million. By the time you get to 2011, you're at 785, around up 786 million. What do you say, well, Marcus? That's growth. But that doesn't take into account the intervening years, where basically in 2009 you were up to about $827 million. That's about a $40 million drop off in terms of the budget over that 2-year period, and that's significant. When we start to look at just the actual, so we're flipped, that's your budget. We start to look at the actual revenue that we got, that we collected in 2011. It was about $5 million below the estimate. And I don't know if it was great. So Dr. Harrison is here, our forecaster for the city. When you get a forecaster, and I say this in a very nice way, a 2% forecast is a good forecast. But when you start to look at within 2% is good. But when you start to look at $800 million, being off 2% is not that good. Okay, so in terms of a forecast, this is a good forecast. Revenue was down about 0.5% less than we expected. We collected about 0.5% less, which is about $5 million. Clearly, the impact on funds coming from the state had a negative impact on the revenue. The good news, if there is good news with that, for the most part, when you talk about human services or even schools, there's typically a corresponding expenditure savings. But bottom line with 2011, the revenue was about $5 million less than expected. I will say that it's important with 2011, we begin to see some local taxes recover. So, and I hope that's not too tiny behind me, but if you go into your top left-hand corner, sales tax, the first time since 2007 we saw growth. Okay, so growth in sales tax. Meals tax, the first time since 2008 we saw growth. Hotel tax has also increased. First time since 2007 we see growth there. And then even the admissions tax, we see growth. The reason I talked about 2007 to begin with, but even though we grew over 2010, we still in many areas are not at the 2007 level. So in other words, sales tax in 2007, we collected $32 million. In 2011, only $28 million. So in other words, yes, we grew over 2010, but when you go back to, if you want to call it the peak in the last 5-6 years, we still aren't at that 2007 level. I can say the same thing about food and beverage tax. It's approximately flat, but it's still not at that level. Hotel motel tax about 14% down since 2007. The same thing with admissions. So again, the good news is that we grew in these key areas in 2011, but that is after several years of decline. And I know you say take good news however you can take it.
Admissions tax,
Sure.
what are you looking at when we're talking about, give me an example.
You buy a ticket to a concert and we collect, I believe it's 10%? 10% admissions tax on that ticket, so,
Does that include the Constance Center?
no.
You know, that's another whole.
Yeah, that's a
Can of
different
worms.
issue, yes.
Yeah, I think the answer there is yes and no.
I don't think we can either
So
one.
that if it's a collegiate sporting event,
Right.
no. And I think that if it's
It's like
a
Elton
rock
John.
concert, Elton John, I think the answer is yes.
Okay, and how about, so we're looking at
Andy,
like,
we used to collect it, and then when times got tough for them, they stopped collecting. I mean, it's a sort of a, some of them do, some of them don't. Finally, all the universities, I think, around the Commonwealth finally decided they didn't need to collect it.
well, I know, but we have one that wants a police station.
Yeah, that's,
It'd be nice if we worked together.
sure.
Maybe they can start collecting it. I'm serious, let's talk to them about it.
I will tell you that,
We
and
also have football.
I'm jumping
Yeah.
ahead a little bit, but I will tell you that this story continues in the current fiscal year. So in other words, we're seeing growth in these four revenue areas again through the first 5 months of 2012, which is huge, which is very important.
Marcus, quickly before you go, what happened in 2007 that the admissions tax was down 13.3%?
I'll have to go and look
No,
at it.
no, don't.
Okay.
That's pretty big.
So, again, remember with the admissions tax, and so I'm not going to say that this is what happened, but you get a great show like The Lion King, or you get something like Wicked, it's very difficult to grow over that the next year. You know, my hope is that sales tax, I hope that op sale 2012 is so great at the end of this fiscal year that we're worried about, growing over it in 2013, but still that's some expectation of great economic activity. 2011, if we look at on the budget side, about $20 million and a positive variance. So in other words, while there was $786 million in expenditure authority, we didn't spend it all. Now, I will tell you that a piece of that, about a third of it, is when I mentioned earlier, when you don't get some reimbursements from the state, whether it's human services or if the dollars don't come in for schools, again, there's not a corresponding expenditure. So I'll say roughly a third of that is really pass-through money not coming in from the state. But 2/3 of it is literally the staff. And I really appreciate what the staff did. I mean, this staff basically said, we're treating this city as if it were our own home. We're cutting out lights when we leave a room, things of that nature. And their hard work and efforts is where you get 2/3 of the savings. So that's huge. I will tell you an update from where we are in September, okay? Bottom line, and I know, Councilman, when we talked about this a little bit, so I'm going to try to do a better job of an explanation, okay? Bottom line is that we are $9 million. We were $9 million up in 2011. So in other words, after we had taken care of all of our obligations, we had a positive variance, call it a surplus, what have you, about $9 million. Basically, what changed between September and today, or when we finally got the books done in December, was basically about $2 million more. So if you remember, we were about at the $8 million range, and I said it's very important if we keep our reserve, our 5% reserve, at the same level it was last year, that I'd like to keep, $2 million set aside for that. So even after you do that, there's $9 million that we had this positive variance for the period ending June 30, 2011, that at the retreat, you said, don't touch it. Let's leave it there and make sure we are prepared for 2013. And I'll say it's an excellent decision because at some point in this presentation, we'll talk about 2013 and the challenges.
Marcus, okay, so there it is. It's the 11 million. I saw it. I'm sorry. That was the 11 million to the good. We've
Right.
put 2 million away into the
Right.
undesignated fund balance. We have $9 million towards next year's budget.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Sorry.
So let's go up mid-year. This is a very good slide, and I'll give staff credit and the budget, finance, IT, everyone, in terms of literally hunkering down and saying, how can we make sure that we take any kind of savings we can get in this current fiscal year? Because ultimately, if we're looking at 2013, we want to protect jobs. To what extent can we make some changes right now that can help us? And I'll say that unlike in previous years where we talk about we're tracking a $5 million shortfall in the middle of a fiscal year or something along those lines, we're actually tracking to be again in the positive territory at June 30, 2012 to the tune of 5 to 7 million. Okay?
That's taking the 9 million and
Nine-
putting it in?
Leaving them at 9 million
Okay.
there.
Okay.
We're saying we set that aside, we go to how we're going to operate in 2012. And again, right now, we feel good that we can still have another surplus, if you will, at the end of 2012 in that $5 to $7 million range. But let me tell you, we're doing some things. Back in the fall, the budget director sent out a message to all the departments and basically said, we are going to have some saving strategies in the current fiscal year. So there are some things that are happening right now in the administration that will produce savings in 2012. Absent that, we would not have this type of savings. I will say two pieces. The general fund revenue, while we're saying it's going to be $2 to $3 million less than anticipated, about $4 million of that is related to a new way that the state is going to handle daycare reimbursements. Nothing's going to happen to the programs, but instead of giving the money to the city and the city giving it to the provider, it's going to go directly to the provider. So if I can account for that $4 million, we're actually tracking ahead of revenue at this point, which is huge. Okay, so some of those revenue sources that you saw, sales tax, meals tax, again, that growth is continued through 2012. Again, on the expenditure side, we're tracking to $8 to $10 million under budget. I will say that same $4 million that's going to hurt me on the revenue side is going to help me on the expenditure side. Okay. What I will say is that unlike in previous years, and I'll just race through this. Yes, sir. Oh, unlike in previous years, we're taking those saving strategies that we have in 2012, and we're going to start in 2013 with just implementing it. In other words, not this one-time save it here, and then let's reset the button again, and you have what you had at the beginning of the fiscal year. And that's very important because at some point we're going to talk about a structurally sound budget, and we need to have some ongoing saving strategies and not just go through a fiscal year and every fall send out the red warnings, and say, okay, what can we do? No, we need to just change the way we do business. I mentioned this earlier. Basically, when you look at the mid-year update, two things happen. I think it's important to say this in terms of being good on the revenue side. One piece of it is that when this budget was built, the assumption was that real estate revenue would decline almost 5%, 4.95%. When the numbers came out from the assessor, they were closer to 3.5% decline. So that in and of itself provided us with some revenue that we didn't think we would have. But what's more important, what I like seeing here on the good news front, is again those sales, meals, hotel, admissions, tax through the first 5 months of the fiscal year are still growing. They're growing over that same period of time in 2011. Now here's the challenge. The challenges begin with real estate. We'll get more updated numbers from the assessor, but right now it appears that the overall real estate assessments will decline between 2.5% to 3%. Okay, that would be the third year of a decline in real estate assessed values. That's unheard of. We 2 consecutive years was unheard of, and now we're going into the third year. But I think it's something important to point out that we're talking about overall assessed values, and I don't think it's fair to have this conversation in the vacuum. And I go back to 2002, when our overall real estate assessments were about $8 billion. Okay. When you go to 2010, overall assessments were about $19 billion. Okay, so even though we have these 3 years of decline, in 2012, overall assessments are about $18 billion. $18 billion is still twice as much of our overall assessments back in 2002. So while we're going through something right now, it doesn't discount that there has been a great deal of assessed value increase in the city over the last decade. But that's going to be a challenge to us for various reasons. And one is that real estate values have a negative impact on our ability to issue debt. Okay, and I'll get into that. And Mayor, I don't know how we're going with time. I don't know how you, if you needed something for the end or if you wanted to be great. I will say real estate tax is about 25% of our overall revenue. And I always put this chart in because as the real estate assessed values increase, then we go back to 2007, almost 25%. Okay, as those assessed values increase, the council made a decision to cut the rate. So you'll see the assessed values, and you get to 2006, almost a 17% increase, and then almost a 25% increase over the 17% increase. Okay, and that's why the rate goes from about $1.40 per $100 of assessed value down to where we are at $111. But again, as you start to look at these last 3 years and the projection for 2013, uncharted territory, 3 consecutive years of negative growth. On the next slide, to put this into perspective, I go back to 2010 when we collected about $192 million in revenue related to assessed real estate, about 25% of the portfolio. If this 2.5% to 3% decline holds true, we'll be back to about $175 million in 2013, which is about $17 million off of our peak. So you have the situation of the real estate, decline in real estate assessments really having a negative impact on our overall budget. I'll skip that slide and I'll go to just a quick assessment of what that means when we start to talk about real estate declines. What does this mean for the taxpayer? If you look at 2010, the average homeowner's tax bill was about $2,570. If we have another decline in 2013 of this magnitude, and the real estate, so the blended rate is 2.5% to 3%, residential is closer to projecting to be 3.5% down, then the tax bill would be, instead of being at almost $2,600, it would be closer to $2,300. So that's about a $300 savings. That's to a individual taxpayer, but to the city, what does that same math mean for the city? You go back to, and no one is suggesting a real estate tax increase at all, okay? We're just doing a mathematical assessment here. To get back to that $192 million, it would be the equivalent of the tax rate being 10 cents higher. Let's do it a different way. And I think this is the key point here, that even if real estate assessments grew by 3%, in other words, I'm trying to make up those 3 years of those losses, even if we grew by 3% each year after 2013, it would take me until 2017 just to make up what we've lost in those 3 years. And if you look at it that way, that would be almost 7 years of what I call below average real estate assessed growth, which is in the 6% range. So that is one of our challenges. Great news about where we are in 2012, but because of this, it puts a strain on our ability to address the budget. I will go, because I'm worried about time. I do want to show you one thing. The 2013 preliminary gap. Unlike in the past, I'm not going to throw a gap out here and just say, okay, we got a problem. Sure, if I start to add up all the issues that are out there, I could start off with a gap of about $25 million. But remember, we got $9 million from 11. We're projecting somewhere between 5 to 7 and 12. If I put those two together, the gap is closer to $7.5 million. I will tell you that we can solve a $7.5 million gap. All right. What we need to keep on the radar is if we solve that, that doesn't mean that we've solved 14. So right now, while we feel comfortable about 13, that we will close that gap, 14 becomes a problem because we can't assume that we're always going to have surpluses. And better yet, and I don't think we'll have time tonight, I'd like to get to the point where we take those surpluses and we're putting it in our 5% reserve. We're putting it in our risk management reserve. We're putting it in our economic, downturn leveling reserve. And I'm sure people say, if there's ever time to go into a rainy day fund, this is the time. But that's the conversation I'd like to have with the council as we move forward, that we can address 13, but my concern now is 14, and how can we make some systematic changes today that makes 14 more tolerable. And I know I have more slides, but I'm just being respectful of your time.
Why don't we, I know next week we're gonna meet with the school system, but once they're gone, why don't we have some of this conversation again? Would that be okay, and you get to some of these, because I know we have some questions. I'd like to know how all this, whether you've calculated, the school system's needs, and, I mean, whether you're just talking about level funding or, because that's gonna be a concern. I mean, there are all sorts of things. We haven't, our folks haven't had pay raises in, 4 years. I mean, all of that needs to get out on the table. And then, I mean, how do you aggressively diversify the economy? We have some downturns maybe in defense spending. What do we, you mentioned Waterside is, maybe one of those things, but one of the ways that we double the assessed value of this city was being pretty aggressive in our economic development work. So maybe we need to talk about some strategies there too.
We welcome that discussion. I think it'd be a great one.
Okay. All right. Great. We had a great afternoon.
Mr. Manager.
Here.